Hello and welcome back to Supposedly Fun. My name is Greg. I'm here with my buddy Guinness, who's napping in this chair right there, to do my Friday Reads video. Now, for full disclosure, I am recording this week's Friday Reads in advance. It's currently Tuesday, and I just finished recording my reaction to the Booker Prize shortlist, which was announced earlier today, and I will put a link to that video in the description box down below if you would like to check it out, if you have not done that already. The reason I am recording in advance is that I am going to be out of town for the remainder of the week, and I don't think I will be able to record a Friday Reads video on Friday to post on Saturday, which is what I usually do. So I am recording a little bit early, but I do still have things to talk about. I finished a book, I've made some progress in others, and there are some fun Friday Reads things to talk about anyway. So I am recording early, but there's still a lot to talk about, and that's a good thing. So before we get to the actual Friday Reads portion of this video, a couple things to run through. Now, I mentioned in my last Friday Reads video what the plan for this trip is, and I will link last week's Friday Reads video down below. But if you missed that, we are going to Colorado for the funeral of my husband's grandmother. She died last year. Basically, she was in an assisted living facility. She was, I think, 98 years old and did not do well in lockdown. She sort of mentally deteriorated really quickly, and we ended up losing her. So she did not die of COVID, but it is indirectly a casualty of the pandemic, and that is really sad. We have had a year to sort of get used to it, so that is good. It's sad, but she was a wonderful, remarkable woman, and I think we're both happy that we are finally going to have a chance to celebrate her life. So it feels almost joyful to get to celebrate her, because we didn't get a chance to last year at all. And she had requested that her ashes be spread in Colorado in the mountains. So that is what we are going to do. So, you know, the sadness is a little bit behind us. It will still carry with us, but it feels good to have a chance to celebrate her. And one of the things that I love the most about her is that I managed to talk to her about the Dust Bowl. I had just finished Timothy Egan's book, The Worst Hard Time, when she was coming up for a visit because it was my father-in-law's birthday. So she came up to visit for that. And I actually got to sit down with her because she grew up just on the edge of the Dust Bowl. And it would have been old enough to remember it. So I had a chance to ask her about it and talk to her. And she remembers, because they were not hard hit by the Dust Bowl. They were sort of on the outer edge where the hardest things that were going on didn't happen. But they obviously had a lot of people passing through their town that had been hit really hard by it. A lot of people went through hard financial times and losses and things like that. And she said that her memory of it was that her community really came together to support everyone. And that is what she remembers the most about the Dust Bowl, that it was hard. People frequently lost friends, relatives, money, and all of that. And when that happened, the community would come together to see what they could do to support them and help them get by. And that was her takeaway from the Dust Bowl. And I think thinking about it later, you can see how her growing up in that time period really had an impact on her entire life, because that's the kind of person she always was. And you can see how having that formative experience at a formative age probably made a huge impact on her, because she was always really thinking about charity. She was always helping people and doing for other people. And then she was surprised when other people would care about her, because she would always put herself last. And she was a remarkable woman, and I'm glad that I was able to talk to her about that. But anyway, the purpose of the trip is for her. But since we are getting on the road, we were thinking about what we could do to try to make this a bit of a fun trip. And on Independent Bookstore Day, I purchased a map of independent bookstores from the Montana Book Company. And it has little circles that you can color in for each of the independent bookstores that you pass. So my husband looked at the map, looked at our driving route, and figured out how many of those stores we could hit to color them in and just make it a sort of bookstore tour on our way down to Colorado. And of course, there are a lot of independent bookstores in Colorado. A lot of good feedback on the tattered cover from my Friday Reads video. I'm really excited to get to that store. So we're trying to do something fun, and I'm going to try to vlog this experience as we do it. I mentioned I feel really awkward filming in public and especially in stores. So I'm going to kind of wait and see. I may do vlog it in sort of like wrap-ups and things like that, where it's like, these are the stores we hit today. Here are any bits of merchandise that I got. I'm fully expecting to spend a lot of money on t-shirts in any of these stores that have t-shirts available. So I don't know what form the vlog is going to take, but I'm going to try to vlog the experience, and we'll see how that goes. So that's the plan for the rest of the week and for next week. In other news, just a fun thing that we started watching this week. There's a Netflix animated show called Q-Force, which sounds totally silly, but we kind of wanted something silly, and it's actually kind of fun. Sean Hayes voices the lead character, who is front of his class, getting into the Secret Service or becoming some kind of a spy. They're really vague about what branch of whatever agency he's going for it is, because it's an animated show and it doesn't have to be realistic. But he's the front of his class, and in his valedictorian speech, he announces, because Don't Ask, Don't Tell had just been repealed, he announces that he is gay, and they immediately take away his valedictorian status and tell him that he is going to be stationed in West Hollywood, where there's nothing going on for him to do. And they never really give him a chance. So he finally takes some initiative to prove himself, and that is the premise of the show. And it's kind of silly, but it's kind of fun. Wanda Sykes does a voice as well, and I would recommend it if you have Netflix and are looking for something silly and amusing to watch. And then just a quick PSA before we do my 3K Q&A question, because I've heard a lot of independent bookstores and a lot of people in the publishing world talk about supply chain issues that will be coming up, and the importance of ordering and pre-ordering and doing your holiday shopping early. And I want to do my part to help with that, because I know last year there were a lot of instances where people got really upset with stores when they couldn't get things in particularly at the last minute as we approached the holidays. And let's avoid all of that as much as possible and really help these stores out. Basically, the supply chain is getting bad, which means that there is going to be demand problems. And if you want to order something, the later it gets in the year, the closer to the holidays, it's going to be really hard to get. And I'll put an article from Book Riot in the description box down below so you can check out more. But the takeaway is this: if there's something coming out in the latter part of the year that you would really like to read, pre-order it. Because if you pre-order it, the store will know to get it in. The publisher will get a better idea of what the sales are going to be like, so they might be able to print more copies and have more available early, and they won't have to try to play catch up later. It's just going to be a good thing to do. And then try to think about your holiday shopping and your gifts on the early side, if you can. I know it's really early, but try to think about it and maybe do your shopping early so you can get everything in and you don't have to try to order things at the last minute. That's my PSA. So please, again, I will put a link to the article from Book Riot about the supply chain issues and the problem that is looming over our heads in the description box down below. Please check it out. I have pre-ordered at least 3 books from Montana Book Company that are coming out in the latter part of this year. And it's just thinking about holiday shopping. It's difficult because I have nieces, and my sister is going to have to, I'm going to try to get her to think about what they want early as well, and we'll see how that goes. But I'm going to try to do my part as much as I can. With that, let's get to the question from my 3K Q&A. If you follow along, you already know what this is, but if not, basically I did a Q&A when I crossed 3,000 subscribers, and I didn't get to all of the questions in individual videos, so I'm going through one question per week in a Friday Reads video. This week's come from Sarah Hepworth, who says, I'm interested in the stained glass around your house. Please can you show and tell us more? And I am going to take a bit of a cop-out on this one because I talked at length about the stained glass in a previous Q&A video, so I'm going to put a link to it in the description box down below and just say that the only one we didn't do is this one right here. This is something we commissioned while we were in Canada. We got married in Canada in 2013 in the Banff area. We got married on Lake Moraine, and while we were in a store in Canmore, they sold stained glasses. We reached out to the artist and asked if he could do Lake Moraine, and he did. And it has imperfections in it. So we have been kind of joking to ourselves that at some point we're going to redo it. but we haven't right now. But that's the only one we did not do ourselves. This was Joel's first stained glass project. Mine was this book one right here that you can't really see because the sun is shining a little too brightly. But I'll put the link where I talk more about all of those projects in the description box down below. We did the fire in the fireplace. This is not a working fireplace, so we created our own fire to go into it. And we have had problems because there's no electrical outlet in this freestanding chimney thing. And so we need LED lights. And we have not been able to find LED lights that will last more than a couple of days. It's been annoying. But anyway, we did that one as well. So I'll put a full link to the video where I talk about that down below, and you can check it out if you would like more about all of that. And let's get into the actual Friday Reads portion of this video and start with the book that I finished this week. I mentioned in my last Friday Reads video that Run, the first in a new trilogy by John Lewis, Andrew Aydin, El Fury, and Nate Powell, had become available at my local library. And because it is less than 150 pages, I knew I could easily cram it in an afternoon. And that's exactly what I did. I think I actually managed to finish it in about an hour because I didn't realize this. I said it was less than 150 pages. It's barely more than 100 pages because there's a lot of supplemental material in the back. And that is actually something I really appreciate about this book, because in the back, it has all of these notes about the pages and the different sections in it to talk about how because it's a historical book, so it talks about the research that led them to create that. And some of the dialogue is from speeches and things like that, but some of it is not. So in order to be as historically accurate as possible, they did a lot of work, and the appendix of the book goes through a lot of the process and the research that they did to show how accurate it is, which I really appreciate. But so it's barely over 100 pages. I will say there's a big difference between reading books as they are published and reading them one after the other as when they're all immediately available. And it's interesting because I've heard a lot of people talk about this with Ted Lasso. Most people caught on to that show after all of the episodes from the first season were already available, so they just binged their way through the first season. But now there's doing one episode per week, and people were getting frustrated because they were like, nothing's happening. And now it seems, I don't watch Ted Lasso, but people are starting to say, oh, it all paid off somehow. So I started reading the March books, the original trilogy that John Lewis did in graphic memoir format, one after the other, because they were all published by the time I caught onto them. And by the time the third one won a National Book Award, and I just tore through them within like 3 weeks. I think I read one each weekend until I was done. And they were fantastic. So it would be interesting to go back and see if they stand up individually or if they do really well as a trilogy, because this one feels a little bit slight. It picks up almost immediately where the others left off, but it is not as much about John Lewis's time in the civil rights movement. It pivots to his role in politics, or it's about his pivot into politics. So the first volume in the series picks up after the March at Selma, in the months after that, where people are getting frustrated with the nonviolence movement and whether or not they're getting results, and younger people are coming up through the ranks and really want to do things their own way. And even though he was only about 25 or 26 at the time, he is seen as sort of the old guard and people want to push him out. The Black Panther movement is not created in the form in which most people think of it, but it's sort of getting its footing a little bit. And things are starting to change. So in the months after, he almost becomes not disillusioned by the movement, but he realizes the movement is changing. It requires different leadership at this point. He doesn't know if he's the best person for that job. And he is ultimately pushed out of the SNCC, which is the group that he was chairman of. And the book ends with that and with him kind of wondering what he's going to do next. But it feels very slight. However, I think this is going to function really well as a trilogy, because this is a lot of foundation. You kind of need this story to get that pivot into politics. Like now the next book is really going to be able to pick up with where he goes from here. This is sort of essential about like how he went from civil rights movement, exited the organization he was with, and ultimately ended up in politics. So I think it will pay off, but it feels on its own a little bit slight. However, I fully trust in the story. There is a note at the beginning of the book that they had John Lewis's part in this book was complete by the time he died, but it does not say anything about volume 2 or 3. And I really hope that they have enough material from him to finish the story, because it would be a great shame not to, especially since this seems to be building up for a payoff later. So I definitely recommend it, but if you want to wait until all of the volumes are available, I would not begrudge you that either. So that's what I finished this week. I continued my buddy read of Love Medicine with Britta Bowler, continued to love this. Britta kindly agreed to hold off on a check-in this week because I will be traveling, but we both want to finish the book before the end of the month. So we are going to try to get through the next 100 pages once I get back, and that way we will be done with this book by the end of the month. Really enjoying it. One thing we have been talking about a fair amount in our check-ins is that this is Louise Erdrich's debut novel. All of her works create this sort of almost like Marvel Cinematic Universe of people. There are characters in this book who certainly show up in other books. The family is at the center of a lot of other ones as well. I started with her later books. The first book of hers I read was Plague of Doves, and I've read a lot of the ones that published since then, but this is the first time I've gone back to the beginning. And in the beginning, she really knows, or seems to know, how this universe is going to work. Like, she's setting up, like, you almost wonder, did she have a plan for that to be the case? Because it just seems like it's going to work, and you can see how the story is going to continue to spin out from here, and then this will continue to be the linchpin throughout the rest of her career. And that's fascinating. And she also has a masterful control on her tone and the story and what she wants to say, which is rare for a debut novel, for someone to have such control over it. The only other author I can think of who had such control in their debut novel was Toni Morrison, because she emerged as a fully formed writer who knew exactly what she wanted to say and how she wanted to say it. And that is Louise Erdrich. So I'll have a lot more to say about this one when we finish. Since I haven't talked too much about the content of this book in Friday Reads, I may do a standalone review of this. I haven't done a standalone review in a while, and I feel like that's a good candidate for it. Also continued my buddy read of the 5th season with Erica from The Broken Spine. I will put links to both of their profiles in the description box down below as well. Continuing to enjoy this. It is interesting how, kind of similar to the way Love Medicine is set up, the first 100 pages of the book had sort of set up the universe and put all the chess pieces on the table, but Jemisin is really skilled at sort of pulling you in and throwing a lot of information at you without you feeling burdened by the weight of all of it. And she doesn't make it easy for you, but at the same time, it's not difficult to read. So there's this push and pull in this book that feels like it shouldn't be possible, and yet she's pulling it off, which is really interesting and has me interested in continuing this book and continuing in the rest of the series. And I should be okay. I need to finish my check-in for this week because we usually check in on a Wednesday. So I need to finish for this week, and then I'm probably going to be okay for next week, because if we don't check in on a Wednesday, I'll be home Monday and Tuesday, and I should be okay for next week when I can talk a little bit more about further sections of the book. I made a lot of progress in Damnation Spring on audio. I have a copy of the book, but I'm actually listening to this on audio. This is by Ash Davidson. And I did not make a lot of progress on the audio last week, and I made a burst of progress the other day on it. And I hadn't really understood, because I'm really enjoying the book, why I was getting through it so slowly. And then I was telling somebody about the book and just sort of realized there's a lot of really heavy stuff that happens in this book. So I think that's what was making me get through it kind of slowly, because it is about a family that depends on the logging industry in 1977. The husband purchases a plot of land, the one that the book is named for, where he thinks he is going to be able to work the timber on his own and make money for his family and be secure at long last, and his son will have a secure future. It is set in 1977, and he has no idea that there are going to be environmental regulations that are going to make it very difficult, and things are really drastically going to change within the next 2-3 years for the logging industry in California, and he has no idea. His wife is a midwife. She is going through a really rough period because they have a son, but she has been unsuccessful in getting pregnant or carrying a pregnancy to term. she's had a lot of miscarriages, and it's been a really painful experience for both her and the husband. And she desperately wants to continue trying. He is sort of avoiding trying, and that's creating this rift between them. And he doesn't see, because they don't really talk about it, he doesn't really see how important it is to her. It is very resonant. And because this narrative shifts between both of them, you see both sides and understand them really well. And I think that's a great mark of Ash Davidson's talent. This is the debut novel as well, and seems very strong. It also has narrative from the child as well, which is fine, but hasn't come to any really big point yet. I fully expect that this is going to be a little bit upsetting, and I'm sort of bracing myself for it. I think that's where I've been getting through the audio slowly, because there is an environmental component to this as well. The wife is a midwife, and other people are having babies born with birth defects, they're having miscarriages, and she is just sort of starting to question whether or not the pesticides that the logging company is using are to blame for this, because they say that there's no effect. And throughout the book, in the beginning, pesticides are just being bombed in the area. They're being sprayed everywhere. You can taste them in the drinking water because it gets into the groundwater that they use. And it's just, of course, as somebody in the present day, you know that these pesticides can't be good. So it's just kind of like cringe-inducing, and the son keeps getting nosebleeds. So you know it's not going to be happy, I'm guessing, wherever it goes. But it is a very interesting book, very expansive and interesting. Ash Davidson has really good control over this narrative as well. But she talked in the New York Times Book Review podcast recently about how it was inspired by experiences that she had growing up. And I think that's really interesting. So I am getting through this slowly, but on the trip, I'll probably be hopefully listening to audio a little bit as well and make a little bit of progress. I did not get a chance to get any further in Fight Night by Miriam Toews, because I just have a lot of other stuff going on right now. And with the buddy reads, I wanted to make sure I didn't fall behind. So I am going to continue working on it. I'm still very much at the beginning of the book, and as such, I want to wait until I've gotten a little further in to talk about it, but I will hopefully be making some progress on it this week, maybe next. It doesn't actually come out in the US until October 5th, but I'm looking forward to talking about it a little bit more once I make some progress on it. So that is everything I've been reading and watching and dealing with in the scant few days since I recorded my last Friday Reads video. I'm sure a lot more will have happened by the time I speak with you again. I'd love to hear what you've been reading, what you've been loving. I may be slow to respond to comments. I have been lately anyway, because things have just been busy. But please let me know what you've been doing in the comment section down below. I will do my best to keep up with it. I do read every comment anyway. So if you take the time to leave one, I appreciate it. And I appreciate your time watching this as well. As always, I will be back. Until next time, happy reading.